You're listening to Parents, You've Got This, the expert guide to parenthood.
The complete guide to pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood.
Today on the Expert Guide to Parenthood, we're talking all about child's temperaments and how to bring out the best in yours, and also just to understand what sort of temperament your child has.
We are joined by our child psychologist expert, Deirdre Brandner, who comes with a wealth of experience. She has been working for more than 30 years with families, with children, with teenagers, and she supports them with a range of different issues. She is also a news presenter. She has been on radio, she has written books, and she is a mum as well. So she comes to us today ready and so generous in sharing her expertise with everybody. Thank you so much, Dee, for joining us today. Now, this is a really interesting topic and one that so many parents think about as they're getting to know their little people. Can you talk to us a little bit about the development of a child's temperament and the factors, how nature and nurture both may play a part?
It really is a combination of nature and nurture, and the temperament of a child is often evident even from birth. I think we can all recognise in our children some of the behaviours, the interactions, how easily they were soothed or how engaged they were in stimuli. And that goes a long way to the very first beginning of getting to know your child and understanding their temperament.
That's so true. I remember my son Harvey, but when he was a baby, he just never slept and he never was still. His whole body was moving all of the time, and he's like that now as a child. You know, he's always really active and loves, finds it hard to fall asleep at night. What are the different temperaments that your child can have?
Look, they can be quite varied, and there might be subsets of them. So there might be periods in their life where their temperament presents more a dominant way, but usually before they've actually, in the education system, their temperament is very much, the nature that they've come to, because they haven't had as many impacts of other stimuli. So we would often, when we think of temperament, we would think about how easily they cope with change, how they go about expressing themselves, what their dominant emotion is. Is it cautiousness or is it exuberance? So it's looking at really understanding your child, and that's the most important. It's not always about labelling what temperament does my child have, but understanding what clicks for your child and how they work.
So Dee, on that then, how do we best support our child regardless of what the temperament is that they may have?
That's a great question, because often it can be really difficult if your child's temperament is very different than your own. Yes. And we will see that. We will see that if your partner's temperament's a certain way, we will, by the fact of genetics, have a child that might have a similar temperament to them. But in saying that, I've in my clinical practice seen, very reserved, quiet children come from very, extroverted parents. So I think it's about beginning to understand what your child's like, and if they're not like you, being able to really respect that and see that as a gift, see it as something that you're going to be journeying together.
Yeah, that's so true. I've got 4 children. They all have completely different temperaments, and I have to parent them differently depending on what works for them and what doesn't work for them. And I'm really mindful of this with talking about language. I've got a particularly shy sort of child, and I've got one child that's quite out there, but you don't want your children to be labelled necessarily. How do we go about, parenting our children if they've got different temperaments?
One of the things that we want to make sure we have in our home is a sense of consistency in terms of expectations, but the way we deliver those expectations, the way we communicate with our child depending on their temperament, is what we need to take into account. So, you said for your shyer child, it's giving them time and space, and they might need to have that expectation delivered a couple of different ways. They also might need more time to themselves. If you've got, the extroverted child who constantly needs to be engaged, we have to support that. They might need more activities that happen after school than your other child. So it's not, one size fits all when it comes to parenting, but it doesn't mean you still don't have the same consistent expectations around, bedtime, manners, all those sorts of practical things.
What about the less obvious parts of someone's personality, like if they're a child that feels shy, or they're someone that is so outgoing and talks all the time, they find it difficult to make friends because they're so out there. How do we deal with our children so that we can support them through those challenges if they become challenges for them?
For children, sometimes it's better about making it not about them. So not saying you have to watch lots of television, but I think watching movies together or a series together or reading a picture book together and pointing out, oh, did you notice that in that show, Elizabeth felt really shy, she didn't want to join in? Do you ever feel like that? So using a visual prompt or witnessing something together and drawing them into that moment, with the over-talker, learning that, oh, did you notice that other person in that show, I think he was getting a bit annoyed when they kept talking. Have you noticed that sometimes people get annoyed, when we're talking too much? So making it a really safe place to redirect and have these discussions.
And how do we help our children if other people have labels for them? So, for example, you rock up at the soccer pitch, you've got a quiet child, and someone just says, oh, get in there, you're so shy. And you can see your poor child just like cringe inside themselves, and then they start saying, well, I'm a shy person. How do we help our children in those situations?
It's about helping our child understand themselves without a label, and understanding that it's actually okay to feel shy when we're at new places. And when someone, said I was shy and I wasn't having a go, or you never try, remembering that people don't always know what's going on in our head, and that we don't always know what they're feeling. And I often refer to this as, some days people have really big feelings and they find it necessary to tell us all about them. But we don't always have to listen to everything they say, because we know you and we know what you like to do, and we know what situations are tricky for you and what situations that you can actually smash.
Let's talk about hormones, Dee, and the impact that these have. I know with little boys that testosterone has certainly surged on the different occasions throughout my parenting of my son so far. Can we talk about testosterone and estrogen and how these impact our little people, and what we can expect and how we can help them?
So hormones, like lots of other chemicals in our body, will impact our behaviour. And because they impact our behaviour, they can sometimes impact our thinking and our decision making. It's really it's a fascinating journey to watch our children grow and navigate these different periods. Having some knowledge yourself of it is really important. So doing a bit of light reading, and I say light, about those expected changes and what behaviours we might see. It's not particularly helpful to label it to the child. Oh, you're on a testosterone high today, that's why you're bouncing the ball. They don't need to hear that, all right? But using the language that, when our body's going through lots of changes, or when we're going through lots of growing, we're going to want to do things differently. And so keeping it very general, I think, is much more helpful.
And how do we go about encouraging our children if they've got different temperaments, but you might want to bring out maybe a different side of their personality? You've got a really shy child and they might want to go for class captain, or you've got a really out there child and they want to try and make some friends, or they've got to go quietly to the library. Yes. How do you help bring out the best in your child's temperament?
Role modelling and practice is really helpful. Letting them have small steps. You mentioned the shy child, so it might be about practicing reading their speech in the mirror and then practicing reading it to our family. With your extraverted, gregarious child, maybe offering opportunities for them to have quiet time and downtime, and letting them tap into what that feels like for them, so that they can have a better balance. When you've got a really dominant temperament, it can be difficult to find those moments where there are other aspects of self that need to be promoted, and doing activities or putting in place situations where they get a chance to have a go at that can be really helpful when we're parenting.
Dee, you've touched on a really interesting topic around the sibling dynamic when you do have very different children. You mentioned before that there's, there needs to be the same limits and boundaries in place for everybody. But how does it work in terms of, and what are the best ways to actually help them to foster connection despite their differences, and also to potentially, help to support each other and learn from each other and develop the skills that they can see in their sibling?
It's fantastic when we've got siblings of different temperaments, because it's a perfect opportunity for our children to develop their social skills, their negotiation skills, and their adaptability. So I think it's a really great opportunity for them to learn. But the first thing we need to draw attention to is noticing. So quietly saying, have you noticed how your brother really likes his own space? It might be about, have you noticed that, when Annabelle's at the table, she talks a lot and we don't always get a chance to say what we're thinking. So the first step is noticing without judgment. And then the second step is helping them learn a strategy or have an opportunity to respond to that in a positive manner. So I love that idea when you've got that brilliant mix of personalities and temperaments at home, because they are going to come across that in their education, in their work life, and in their relationships.
And this might be a silly question, but introverts and extroverts, is that the same as temperament?
It's a factor. It's a factor of personality. And I also think that I don't like to think of it as exclusive. There are opportunities where our introverts can be quite engaging and social, and where our extroverts can actually want some inner self-reflection time. And I'm a big believer in making sure that we don't look at things in terms of extremes, and that we look at situations where we're more likely to behave in a certain manner, where our personality or our temperament become more dominant.
Yeah, and I think too, energy comes from that, doesn't it? So some people, they get energy from being around people, and other people get really tired from being around people. Some people need more space, and that can be hard. I think when Freya was talking about, parenting different children because they have different requirements. How do you do that when you've got lots of children or a couple of children?
It's about respect. It's about making it okay, and us always saying, hey, I know you need some quiet time, but we really need to get in the car to go to this party. We'll make sure we're back by this time. And it might be for your, extroverted child. I know that you love, going to that trampoline centre, but your brother finds it really tricky. So we're going to go for 20 minutes, or we're going to go for half an hour, and then we're going to have some quiet time when we get home. So creating balance where you're narrating, I think, is a really great way to put it, where you're narrating the decisions you're making as a parent and explaining that to your children. And sometimes it's also, about getting a partner on board with that, because sometimes they can't understand why, everyone can't love a trampoline centre, or everyone can't love, just being at home and chilling. So it's sort of educating all of you around this, and seeing it as fantastic benefit for having that mix in your family.
That's right, and it's a really beautiful way too, just for understanding other people, and that everybody is different to us.
Yes.
And then, really developing that feeling of respect as well throughout the family unit, and then more broadly too.
Yeah, and that's what makes us special, right?
Absolutely.
And sometimes there's good things and bad things that come with your temperament,
Yes.
learning that yourself as an adult.
Understanding what we need, and that's okay.
And learning what others need and how I deal with that.
Yeah.
That's what we want our children to be, launching, successful humans.
That's right.
That's what it's about.
Oh, Dee, we absolutely love having you on the podcast. Everyone, you've been listening to the Expert Guide to Parenthood, and never forget, parents, you've got this.
Join a Parents You've Got This masterclass today to be prepared, excited and educated for pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. Visit www.parentsyouvegotthis.com.au and sign up for a masterclass today.